A muted Bush, an angry Cruz, and lots of John Kasich. The CNBC GOP debate is over. Welcome to the Huffington Post live stream coverage. I'm Jason Linkins, the editor of Eat the Press. Joining me right now is our senior bank dork, Zach Carter, and our morning email impresario, Lauren Weber. Guys,
whoo,
yeah.
Oh.
There's so many good ideas up on that stage, or so I've heard, because they kept saying so.
Are we allowed to talk about it since we're the media? I don't know.
Yes.
I think we're the bad guys here.
We are so bad because we keep staging debates.
That's a great point, Lauren. I mean, it seemed like the policy proposals were all just sort of vague to insane, and we can get into the weeds later, but the big applause lines all night were for how crappy the liberal media was for asking them questions. And let's be clear, this was CNBC moderating this debate. This is the first time I've ever heard that CNBC, which is like the cable news voice of the capital class, that CNBC is the big bad liberal media out to get conservatives. I've never heard that before.
It became the easy get out of jail free card. Just make fun of the moderators. You don't have to answer a question you don't want to answer. I mean, that's basically how it went.
The worm turned for the media tonight when Ted Cruz was asked a question about the ongoing leadership crisis in Washington and how it's been resolved. The way it was resolved was, of course, John Boehner has facilitated an escape hatch by which the Congress has passed a 2-year budget. We're going to avoid a debt ceiling nonsense or a government shutdown. They asked Cruz what he thought about that. It was a substantive question, one of many that had already been asked that night. And Cruz, probably because I guess it was his first question of the evening outside of his opening statement, and I guess he wanted to start here, regardless of what was happening in reality, immediately accused the media of asking a bunch of baseless, mean-minded, substanceless question. And our own colleague Jonathan Cohn noted right away that he had gotten one of the best and most substantive questions of the night, and he was pissing away his time answering it.
Right, and John Harwood from CNBC noted that immediately. I mean, I just want to get top level. Did you guys think there was a winner tonight, Lauren?
I do think Rubio came away a winner, mostly because nobody did really that great, and he at least managed to kind of still seem there and doing okay. I mean, I think he was able to articulate some points about the middle class and about himself that will resonate with voters more so. Everybody else just seemed to kind of yell about things. It seemed like he was a little bit more level-headed than the rest of the crew, which is what he was probably going for.
So I'm going to disagree with you, but I want to hear Jason's take first.
Okay, so I think that I'll agree with Lauren on the fact that there was no big slam dunk winners as we've seen in the past. I think that we all agreed afterwards in our drunken reverie that Carly Fiorina was the winner of the last debate. Okay, I'm not okay. Tonight it seemed that the big loser was Bush. I think that Rubio looks good in comparison because he's been twinned with Bush in this war of the Florida foils,
and so
he looks better. I think if you adjust for poll numbers, Kasich was a big winner because he got to talk longer than 6 or 7 of the other candidates. Unfortunately for Kasich, he was saying a bunch of things that are going to be immediately rejected by the GOP base. So
he's playing for New Hampshire. He
also got trashed by Donald Trump right out of the gate.
I thought
that was Trump's only good moment of the debate was when he just ripped the hell out of John Kasich. He said, look, you lucked out on fracking because you had a whole bunch of oil in the ground. Like you struck it rich, so that's why your budget numbers look good. And also, reminder, you used to work for Lehman Brothers when they failed. That's not exactly where you want to be.
I just love it when Donald Trump makes a Wall Street joke. I'm going to make fun
on the CNBC debate.
I mean,
here's my objection to the idea that Rubio won this debate. I do think he looked better than a lot of the other people on that stage, but to me, he did not look presidential. And the idea that he's going to be a breakout candidate, because essentially he's the candidate that the establishment, and by establishment we mean the billionaire donor class for the Republican Party, has been trying to get behind since Jeb Bush's candidacy seems to be flaming out. And tonight, I don't think gave any energy to the idea that Jeb Bush is a viable candidate for the GOP nomination. They want to see him be some sort of breakout candidate. If he gets stuck in a 3 or 4 or 5-way war for the Republican nomination with Donald Trump, Ben Carson, Carly Fiorina, other people, Rubio is in trouble. That's going to be a really tough, long slog. If he doesn't look like a breakout candidate early, it's really hard to see this thing being over by March or April when Reince Priebus, the RNC chairman, wants this to be over. I mean, we could be seeing this, as Norm Ornstein says, he's a conservative pundit for the American Enterprise Institute, very, very conservative think tank. we could be seeing this thing running into the convention. And I don't think Rubio
But
is.
see, I push back on that.
Yeah.
I don't know. I think he did much better than, I mean, at least I feel that he did much better than that with the scenario that you're depicting. I don't feel like Fiorina did well enough, and she won the last debate, didn't really do much in the polls.
She also was awful tonight.
You know, Rubio shut down Jeb Bush to the extent that it basically killed his candidacy, and that essentially, hopefully he would pick up the polling points from Bush. I don't know. I just feel like he might get a little more momentum behind him than that.
In the scenario you describe, if Rubio's left as the one establishment candidate and he's going up against 3 of the outsiders or 4 of the outsiders,
he would have all of that.
Then isn't he going to collect the establishment rump of the base
Look at the
sit on that 40% and pick up
just
delegates
to cite Norm Ornstein right now, the outsiders are currently pulling about 70% of the vote right now.
Yeah, but it's like
the collective base is pulling, the collective establishment vote is pulling about 19%. I'm sure those numbers will shift, but right now the idea that shoring up the Jeb Bush vote is a sure ticket for Marco Rubio is not. To me, that's not an obvious
ticket,
knockout.
but I think he will have more going for him than that.
By extension, that means that there's no way for Jeb Bush to shore up the vote any better either.
Right, exactly.
Jeb Bush should just back up
I
and
think
go
these
home
guys are
after
both
tonight.
in trouble. They need to deliver really knockout performances against the anti-establishment candidates, and I didn't see that happen tonight. I'm wondering if you guys thought there were any particular zingers that you felt landed home that just caught your attention.
Well, Rubio actually didn't really go up against any of the outsider candidates. He kind of still maintained a strategy of skating above the fray. And actually, this is the first debate that Rubio actually got pushed back on by the moderators. Usually the moderators are pretty nice to him. They went after his finances, they went after his voting record, and he still managed to kind of deflect it in a way that wasn't horrible. So I really thought if I had to guess, I bet most people will think he won the debate after tonight.
Well, let me bring the subject around to something that was a big topic of conversation tonight, which were the candidates and their tax plans. They jumped right into it with Donald Trump, and CNBC right out of the gate expressed a great deal of skepticism about Donald Trump's tax plan. In fact, they sort of like applied the critique that a lot of sensible people have applied to Donald Trump, which is that to every single problem he meets on the way, his solution is some mixture of strongly worded emphasis,
Yelling.
being awesome, getting rid of losers, and then
winning,
and then going like this, because this means the job's been done, and as soon as you do that, everything's great again. So they called him on his tax plan, and they were very skeptical about it. And the grounds that they had for being skeptical about it were that it blew out the deficit, raised taxes on the rich, and it was like such a heady and
cut taxes on the rich.
Precise and composed critique of a tax plan. But I kept thinking, can't you apply that same critique to any of the tax plans we're going to hear about tonight, not just Donald Trump?
It's funny, I wrote a whole story about this,
How
Jason.
about that?
Look at that softball there.
Thank you for the set. Now let's do the spike.
Yeah, absolutely.
So look, the Tax Foundation it's a conservative think tank. They get money from the Koch brothers. I think the people there operate in good faith, but they operate under conservative assumptions about how the economy works, in which cutting taxes for rich people and for Wall Street make the economy grow at wild rates, which ends up being great for everything. This is what the Tax Foundation says about the people who have actually put forward detailed tax plans. Donald Trump's plan would cost over $10 trillion. Bobby Jindal's plan would cost $9 trillion. Those are the big ones. Here we get into the reasonable land. Rick Santorum's plan would cost a measly $1.1 trillion. Jeb Bush's plan would cost $1.6 trillion. Marco Rubio's would cost more than $1 trillion. The only guy on the stage tonight who the Tax Foundation said had a tax plan that would not blow out the deficit was Rand Paul, which they said would save the government $737 billion. But just to pull things back to reality here, when you don't take into account the Tax Foundation's very right-wing friendly assumptions about how the economy works, Rand Paul's plan costs the government $15 trillion, according to Citizens for Tax Justice, another tax expertise group. So basically, everything that everybody on stage tonight was saying about how their tax cuts are going to, help boost growth and save you money and all this stuff, they were all crazy tax plans that were going to explode the deficit, and they just pretended like that wasn't there. And I think CNBC tried to push back against it, but when literally everybody on stage is promising you unicorns and fairy dust, it's really hard to draw a contrast between that. So I think the moderators were in a bit of a difficult spot there. But I mean, policy-wise, I felt like this was just a total clown show. The only thing I can really
because
I can
Carly
really debate
Fiorina said at the end tonight that we heard a lot of good ideas.
And that's exactly who you should listen to,
Right.
Zach. I mean, what?
And
Carly Fiorina is arguably the worst corporate executive of the last 30 years.
I mean, you didn't take her advice to heart. I'm so surprised.
I felt like I wasn't hearing much ideas. I felt I was hearing constantly restated biographies and qualifications.
Yes.
And the sort of.
I'm sorry. Welcome to a presidential debate.
Yeah, well, I know, and I think the Democratic debate, the opening tilt, suffered from the same problem.
Yeah.
But it's still weird to me to hear Jeb Bush and to see him in the position where he constantly has to cite just the basics of his biography, just the basics of his record. Mm-hmm. The fact that he feels he's to constantly be reciting this, he has not moved off square one. He's returned. He's been pushed back to square one.
He's at square negative
really
one right now.
He's really struggling to get off that.
I want to point out one actual instance of policy dispute that came up during the debate, and it was between Mike Huckabee and Chris Christie, neither of whom are going to be president.
No.
So these are people who are at the bottom tier of the GOP debate here, but they actually had a real fight over something, and it was over Social Security. And Mike Huckabee was saying, I don't want to cut benefits for retirees and for old people. And Chris Christie was saying over and over again, hey, I'm the tough-talking truth teller. Let me tell you guys what's going on. Your money's already been stolen. Their money hasn't been stolen. There's a whole Social Security program. That's where the money is. I found that stunning. There's a trust fund for Social Security. It has $2.7 trillion in it. It's projected to be fine until 2034 with no changes. And Chris Christie's just saying that those $2.27 trillion, like, they don't count, and so we're gonna start cutting your benefits. And Mike Huckabee, who said lots of other crazy, weird things,
of Krispy Kreme
and who
donuts.
continues to send emails saying that he can cure cancer. Let's be straight about that, which is weird.
If only.
Mike Huckabee had to be the freaking sane adult in the room and be like, no one has stolen their money. It's actually there, and we can pay it.
You don't think John Kasich had some sane things to say about Medicare tonight?
John Kasich had some saner things to say the entire time. I mean,
you guys tell me the same things that John Kasich said, and then I will tell you why they were insane.
You start off.
Well, okay, look, John Kasich is running what amounts to, at the moment, an apostate sort of campaign for the Republican nomination.
It is a campaign for New Hampshire. It is a campaign for New Hampshire. Yeah,
as she calls it, it's a campaign for New Hampshire. You're not off the mark there calling it that. I would be more, I think it's more accurate to call it a sort of performance art project. The guy behind John Kasich's,
What is this, a walking phoenix, imitation?
It kind of is. To be honest with you, it kind of is. It's the guy who's running Kasich's campaign is a guy named John Weaver. He's an old McCainite. He worked on John Huntsman's campaign last year.
And John Huntsman's campaign had these amazing motorcycle videos, which were kind of performance art. Let's be clear.
Right. So Kasich has dialed back the Dadaism, but the idea is still the same. The idea is that John Weaver's intention right now is to keep alive the notion that the Republican Party can put forth a reasonable person who believes in science, who believes in compromise, and who's capable of working with Democrats and accepting Democratic ideas now and again. What's very interesting about it, of course, is that John Kasich is still, nevertheless, a very conservative guy. In this particular setting, he comes off as the guy that liberals can get with.
He does. I mean, he comes off as the most moderate of the bunch.
So here's the thing. He sounded reasonable on Medicare, for instance, because he was drawing a contrast with Ben Carson, who wants to eliminate it, thinks Medicare is socialism and wants to destroy it.
He expanded Medicaid coverage in his state under
Obamacare.
Under Obamacare.
Yeah, he did
to
do
get
that.
advantage of the dollars.
Yes, which was a smart thing to do because it was free federal money to help the poor people in your state. It was a totally same thing, which everybody thought at the time that Obamacare was passed that all of the conservative governors in the country would be unable to pass up, and then they were proven wrong.
Ben Carson, I don't know if you guys agree with me on this. I think tonight was Ben Carson's perhaps his worst debate performance yet.
Oh, I totally agree with you.
I feel like people observed that Donald Trump felt more prepared. I think that he probably had to be a little bit more prepared because Carly Fiorina is, if nothing else, uber prepared when she hits the stage.
She obviously fucking studies, right?
Carson, it looks to me like he spent a week memorizing the contents of 4 flashcards.
Got 4 memos.
Got 2/3 of them correct, and answered them in the order in which he recalled them, regardless of what the question was tonight.
He totally dodged the drug funding question.
Yes, well,
completely dodged it.
He didn't really attempt anything. the irony is, the worse he seems to do in public, the better he seems to do in the polls.
This is the thing. I mean, I thought Donald Trump had a pretty low energy debate compared to his first debate. I missed the second one. To be fair, he came out of the gate screaming, and then after that, I was sort of like, "Who is this guy?" Whatever. I was bored by him. I'll be honest. I find Ben Carson's continued popularity within the Republican Party utterly baffling. Donald Trump's popularity, I can fit within a sort of post-financial crisis narrative. He's speaking to populist anger, people who feel ripped off by the government, by Wall Street, by trade policy. He creates villains in his narratives. There are bad guys, and there are grains of truth in the narrative that he spins into this big racist, xenophobic, awful narrative. Ben Carson, I just don't get it.
Ben Carson literally came out and said, that time that I stabbed someone in high school.
Yeah, and that was like an appealing... Not tonight, but in a previous statement.
But earlier this week was talking all about stabbing someone.
He said he stabbed somebody who was a teenager. I mean, like...
And what? I mean, the man with no voice is just talking about stabbing
He compares everything to Hitler. Tonight, he did terribly in the first debate, and his poll numbers went up. So, look...
I also don't think people are listening.
He may have won. He may have won because, I'll be honest, I don't understand his candidacy or his appeal, and he does well when by all rights, by all my conventional understanding of politics, he should do poorly. So I don't pretend to know what's going to happen to his numbers after tonight.
He got the question about the drug
pricing, increase, jacking up drugs.
And he said, and this is the thing, he never says anything in this debate that I feel has a spine to it.
No,
that I don't think there's the conviction may or may not be there. And
it's hard to tell because he doesn't have any inflection.
The words coming out of his mouth, and they're just like noises in the air. And
here's the thing.
Wait, but let me finish. He said tonight, I think that sometimes when we're talking about profits, we fail to think about the American people. And I was like, wait a minute.
What does that even mean?
You know you're in a Republican debate. You're never supposed to say that. You're never supposed to say that.
What's weird is
that didn't mean anything.
We got to move on. We got to throw to our friends in Iowa. I mean, the one thing I will say before we go is that it's common in political debates for style to trump substance, but I don't understand how
he has no style.
How Carson wins without even any style. That said, we need to go now to RJ in Iowa, who is in Iowa, which is a place where there will be the first caucus, the first primary of the 2016 field in, I believe, February 1st for the GOP. So, RJ, what's going on?
Well, I'm here at an official Ben Carson debate watch party. As you can see here behind me, they've rented out this movie theater, filling all 132 seats. It's been a great week for the Ben Carson campaign. They have topped 3 different polls in the state of Iowa. One of them, they're actually leading by double digits. Carson has the largest number of donors of any candidate in the state, even Hillary Clinton. Through the month of September, Iowans have contributed $153,000 to Carson's campaign. Carson's Iowa State Director, Ryan Rhodes, credits the campaign's ground game with the major fundraising haul.
I think we're uniquely signing people up in places that some others don't go. We're going and doing things like at the pumpkin patch. We go to, whether it's at the football games or the, I know a lot of people go to some of those things, but I think we've made it more of a get to other places where people aren't necessarily going to be. Because if you're walking into an area where there's 5 candidates or a bunch of people, you have to compete for that. We're able to go to places and kind of be the lone competition so that we can tell people about Ben instead of trying to weed through all the noise.
Well, despite only having 6 campaign staffers in the state, the campaign really credits their massive network of volunteers. Candy Carson, Ben Carson's wife, has been here on the trail, and the campaign says that she's really made an impact. In Des Moines, Samantha Jo Roth reporting. Well, I'm here.
we're back, and joining us now, associate politics editor and superstar Marina Fang. We asked Lauren, so I'll ask you, who do you think won the debate? Let's start with the cliche question.
I think Kasich had some really big moments. I think a lot of people watching at home probably don't know that much about him, so he made kind of a big splash. I think Rubio, definitely, out of the establishment candidates, well, I guess Kasich is one too. Rubio tries to deny that he's an establishment candidate, but
that
he is.
Was a really interesting moment tonight.
Yes.
And it gobsmacked me. Rubio at one point said that the establishment was trying to keep him down, man. And I was like, I thought I was going to take complete leave of my senses at that moment, because he is a darling of the establishment.
He is.
Has been ever since he decided to run for office in the first place.
Yeah, I'm going back through my Twitter feed right now trying to see what it was that I said about Rubio that really drove me nuts. You know, he had this moment where he was talking about his tax plan, where he bragged about how he was going to eliminate all taxes on investment. And that was going to unleash massive growth, and that was going to be awesome. And that was his pushback against the idea that he was doing a tax plan that favored the rich, right? Because John Harwood had called him out saying, the benefits of your tax plan overwhelmingly flow to the rich, not the middle class. How do you explain that? And he said, well, whoa, I'm going to cut all taxes on investment. That means he's going to eliminate the capital gains tax. And the Washington Post noted a few years ago that capital gains flow not overwhelmingly to the top 1%, but to the top 0.1%. 50% of all capital gains accrue to the richest 0.1% of Americans. So he said, no, my tax plan doesn't favor the rich. I'm just going to get rid of this entire tax that pretty much only taxes rich people. I thought it was totally bonkers.
It was bonkers, but he was straining so hard tonight to try to find some kind of footing on the outside.
Yeah.
I don't think he did it.
He seemed bored, honestly, which is not unlike when he's in the Senate, the times when he actually decides to show up, which I thought was really interesting, because his whole point is well, I don't really care about the Senate because I want to be president. Well, maybe when you show up to the presidential debate, you should seem like you want to be president.
What else did he say? He said the Democrats have got the ultimate super PAC. It's called the mainstream media. It's like the way he can become an outsider is by just beating up on the media, which I said earlier, I was just stunned tonight that CNBC became the liberal mainstream media that's out to get Republicans.
Yeah. One thing our Jack Merkinson, who our former colleague, said before the debate, he said, quote, "It is literally insane that CNBC is considered a dispassionate forum for a discussion about the American economy." It's absolutely true. But they did tone down all the whooshing and nonsense tonight, though they did get good yelling in from Jim Cramer and a little bit from Rick Santelli.
Rick Santelli just looked really worked up.
They're pretty warmed up.
Yeah.
Rand Paul, sorry, Ron.
The other dynastic descendant,
right?
Yes.
From a political dynasty.
Rand Paul, right out of the gate, sounded to me tonight like he was just sort of previewing his coming filibuster.
Yeah.
And it's these are the only times he's ever been able to get a real footing in the race, is when he's done some kind of stage drama back home.
Right. There's the tax or the I'm gonna use a chainsaw and just destroy the tax code.
Yes, he's the prop comic of the race.
Right.
He's the Gallagher or the Carrot Top of the race.
Yeah.
For a guy who spends a lot of time talking about fighting the washing machine, he sure does need those Washington mechanics to get ahead, doesn't he?
I mean, I kind of want to ask Marina, he's, Rand Paul's a guy who's clearly at the bottom of the stack. There are 10 people on stage at this debate. Did you think there was anybody who was in the sub, double-digit category who had a chance to break out, who did well tonight?
Well, no, Jeb's not even in the double digits anymore, is he?
No, I think he's 5-6%.
It's something we all are, I think, needing to confront. That Jeb Bush, he's down there with the bottom dwellers now. Yeah, it's crazy.
I think it's either he or Rand got the least amount of speaking time. He was barely there. There were points where I was just oh right, Jeb's here too. Okay.
I will check
there was a
the
certain moment where I was
time.
are people just thinking that he's irrelevant, or have they recognized that he's just not good TV? But then I watched, the other candidates, and Ben Carson just kind of mumbling to himself. That is also not good TV, right?
Yeah, Ben Carson continues to baffle me with I mean, he says these.
Thank you for saying that.
He says these like outrageous things, but says them very, very quietly, like just like whispers them almost, and then he gets these huge poll numbers. But then at the debate, he just like, frankly, I was like, I'm falling asleep just listening to you, and I don't get it.
I said it before we had the break when we were talking to Lauren. Like, I just don't get it. I do not understand why he is popular.
Yeah.
And I don't pretend to have any predictions about where he goes. I mean, he just seems like a strange phenomenon in American politics, and I've come to terms with the fact that I can't predict what happens. I feel like I've got a handle on Donald Trump. I feel like I've got a handle on the Republican establishment. Carly Fiorina, though, another sort of considered an outsider candidate, even though she's a former corporate CEO, which somehow makes you an outsider in the Republican debate. How did you think she did tonight?
Not as well. I think the time she was in the undercard debate definitely stood out. The last debate, she definitely had some big moments. This one I was a little like underwhelmed because I think she got overshadowed by a lot of the fighting amongst the other candidates.
She was really, again, she's really well prepared for these debates.
Yes.
She's composed. She knows what she's going to say. I think she rattles off the parts that she wants to hit very efficiently and effectively. She's just really good at all the sort of the presence, the body, the voice. So it sounds really, really good.
She looks like someone who's done her homework.
But
that's true. That's true. Yeah.
I felt like the cat jumped in the previous debate.
Yeah.
And it jumped mainly because there was this lingering kind of shadow boxing going on between Trump and Fiorina that we started the debate talking about, more or less ended the debate talking about. And remember, one of the things I said, critiquing my own critique of the that debate,
snake
is
eating
that
its tail.
when I thought about what did Carly Fiorina do to win, I realized that what she had done was something very synthetic. She stood up to Donald Trump at a debate. She didn't distinguish herself in a way that had a practical application.
But didn't get crushed, because remember, Rand Paul tried to do that in the first debate, and as soon as he did that, I mean, Donald Trump just totally destroyed him. I felt like Trump was really hard on John Kasich today, had delivered some just devastating blows against him, but not against anybody else.
Why do you think he was devastated?
That whole Lehman Brothers
The Lehman
exchange?
Brothers thing?
Yeah.
Saying, you're talking a big game about striking oil, and by the way,
But we
Lehman
know,
Brothers,
but come on,
bailed
you
out.
and I both know that John Kasich didn't have his hand at the tiller of Lehman Brothers or was responsible for its collapse.
I don't know why is being a like major employee. I mean, here's the thing: like if John Kasich didn't have a major role in Lehman Brothers' collapse, it's because he wasn't really doing much there because he was a political appointee who was sitting there making a ton of money working at a Wall Street bank.
And so I think is the real critique.
And so I don't see why Trump pointing that out is not damaging to him. I think that's very damaging, especially if he's supposed to be the reasonable
he's
guy.
He's overselling it. Trump is trying to categorize John Kasich as an engineer of the financial collapse.
No, he didn't. I don't think he did that. He just said this guy can't be trusted. He's a loser who works with like crappy big Wall Street banks.
That's not how I saw it.
But
by the way, I just want to backtrack 1 second. You were totally right. Bush and Paul both circled the drain of the time tonight that was available for the debate. Not surprisingly, Carly Fiorina, the most time.
I want to highlight one
to see
thing that Carly Fiorina said, which I think has sort of fallen by the wayside in the deluge of other crazy things people said. She made this point about the tax code, okay? And she said that it was, it was 73,000 pages long, I think maybe 77,000, some very large number of pages. And she said her plan was going to be to reduce the tax code to 3 pages. That's 1, 2, 3. Not 3,000, just 3 pages.
And like one part of that tax code will say like U.S. tax code in it.
Yeah.
And at the end, this has been the U.S. tax code.
Yeah.
So really, we're talking
about
about
actually left blank. Like
2 and 6/8 of a page.
Maybe.
I mean, Marina, that to me, like as a tax nerd, I was like, that's insane. That's just obviously insane on its face. She said you have to do that because if you. That 3 pages is the limit at which a small business owner or a farmer can understand the tax code without having to hire somebody. I mean, that struck me as totally nuts. Do you think that matters at all to voters?
I don't think so. I mean, I think it's also, I think I see this a lot with Republicans, is this like anti-intellectualism, like they think voters are like, okay, we need everything to be very simple, and here I am, I'm going to reduce the size of government because it's too complicated for everyone, and it's too big. So yeah, I don't know if voters would necessarily buy that. Like maybe you do need, you need a tax code. It can't be 3 pages long.
Yeah, I don't even know what it's. I don't even know where to begin with that. But I realize now that we're talking about it, that was one of the ideas she said that was good, that was discussed in the debate, right? That was like one of them.
I mean, I want to be fair to the Republicans here, because I think you're right.
You don't think we've been unfair?
No, I think we have been. But
literally trying to struggle to understand.
Look, I think this was a terrible debate where everybody did poorly and said things that were nuts. But I think it's important to remember that the Democratic debate, which happened just a couple weeks ago, a lot of people said some pretty crazy things that didn't make any sense. And by a lot of people, I mean Hillary Clinton. And were declared the winner after saying these things.
Right.
Because I mean, to be very clear, Hillary Clinton, in terms of just pure style, pugilist kind of debater, model UN kind of skills, she outfoxed everybody. But she was going around saying that her Libya policy was awesome. It was smart power at its best. It was a great success.
Yeah.
Libya is a massive disaster terrorist haven. You got to have a better answer than smart power at its best. You've got to have an explanation for why the current terrorist haven hellhole that Libya is better than the other alternatives that could have come about had your particular war policy not come to fruition. I think people hit Bernie Sanders for saying that he wasn't really detailing how he was going to pay for a lot of his plan. There's a Wall Street Journal editorial which said it would cost $18 trillion. That was ridiculous. Their math was insane. But still, if everybody's going around talking about how much the Republican tax plans are going to cost, Democrats should have to be able to come up with some sort of accounting plan. Here's exactly how much we're going to tax the rich to pay for these things, and if it's going to be a 40% or a 50 or 60% tax rate on the top, whatever, 1, 2, 3%, that should be something that people have to explain. Given that, though, I mean, I felt like the Democratic debate was actually, for the most part, about serious policy issues where people were actually coming up with ways to deal with problems. I felt like the Republican debate tonight was a lot of people crying about the media and insisting that economic growth and tax cuts were going to fix everything. You have any thoughts on that, Marina?
Yeah, I thought it wasn't substantive. I mean, especially since this was about economic policy, it was like, okay, maybe I was naive to think this, but like, okay, maybe we'll talk about specifics. But like you said, it was just like, government is bad, we need to grow the economy, just all these very vague statements about what we're actually going to do, and nothing specific in terms of policy proposals.
Yeah, I mean, it seemed like every time someone asked what was up there, like, I'm going to cut your taxes. I'm going to cut your taxes.
I'm going to grow the economy.
And I wonder how much of that is because it was CNBC. But, I mean, you saw in the undercard debate, which we haven't talked about that much, because a lot of people who are watching this probably didn't see it, because nobody really thinks that Bobby Jindal is going to be president, right?
It also feels like it was a lifetime ago.
Right, it does. It feels like it was forever ago, but it wasn't. Undercard debate, there were some really interesting and emotional moments from Lindsey Graham. He spoke off the cuff repeatedly about how he was a bad student. Which seemed kind of weird thing for someone who wants to be president to do. He spoke very emotionally, I thought, about his immigration policy platform. And the only other thing I heard in the undercard debate was, these guys who are not going to be president saying that like they had awesome records and that's why you should vote for them. Bobby Jindal is still in the race. Let's be clear. He's still in the Republican nomination race. And it's what is it now? It's October, and he has less than $1 million in the bank in his campaign fund. He's at like what, 1% in the polls, maybe?
It's not a lot to get you to Iowa.
Yeah.
But now we're going to show you how to get to Iowa by magic of television. Here's Samantha Jo Roth with a report from Iowa.
Well, HuffPost is here at Ben Carson's official debate watch party in Des Moines, Iowa. This party actually set up by the campaign. We talked to voters here about Ben Carson's appeal and exactly why they think he's leading the GOP field.
I think a big reason that he's been kind of taking the top of the polls is because he's been consistent. People are finally able to take notice, take him seriously. I think when he's been more bold in some of his statements, that sets him apart. when he has been able to stand up and kind of make a point to say, no, I'm not going to be on SNL, I'm not going to be part of the media circus, and to just say, make a point to say I'm taking this seriously. I think that really shows a lot about his character.
A lot of people are simply dissatisfied with the way politics have been going. They're dissatisfied with both political parties. And I think that he speaks to that. I think that's why he has attracted grassroots support across this state. He's obviously an African-American candidate. He's doing, at this point, he's doing better than Barack Obama did back in 2008. So, I think that he's got a groundswell of support. You can look around this room. There's diversity here.
I think more and more people are finding out that he is authentic and how smart he truly is. If they've watched any of his interviews on YouTube, they're finding out that he's the real deal. And Trump has a lot of good qualities, a lot of good thoughts, but Ben Carson has the gift from God to go with that. And he has a little bit more class, I think, than Donald Trump.
Originally renting a 48-person theater, Carson's staff actually had to move the event to a bigger venue. Despite a slew of controversial comments in recent weeks, Carson seems to be striking a chord with likely Republican caucus goers here in Iowa. But the question of whether or not he'll play on a national scale is still unclear. In Des Moines, Samantha Jo Roth reporting.
And why do you insist on this type of computer? The Carly Fiorina type.
Welcome back to the Huffington Post post-debate coverage of the third Republican presidential debate hosted by CNBC. We are not hosted by CNBC, but the debate was. We are joined now, I'm Zach Carter, joined as usual by Jason Linkins, and some of our podcast listeners may recognize the voice of this man, Arthur Delaney, who is a frequent co-host of the So That Happened.
Jeb, you gotta do something different. And then he came out and didn't talk and looked sad, and then he tried to burn Marco Rubio, and Marco Rubio basically blew him out of the water.
It's been done by better people than me, but I'll just point out it's getting harder and harder to find images of Jeb Bush on the campaign trail where the light in his eyes is shining anything other than, I need to get the fuck out of mind that his turn stop being.
Winnowing process, so the people who looked bad, I think, stand out the most, and Jeb Bush, and then John Kasich, after the first 15 minutes where he came and said, I'm so mad, and then Donald Trump basically burned him like, yeah, you got lucky with the fracking, John.
How'd your Lehman Brothers experiment go?
Yeah, which apropos of nothing, like, this guy was at Lehman Brothers?
Which you could also say about Jeb Bush, but Donald Trump didn't even bother punching down at Jeb Bush anymore. He was like, I got that guy.
And that was it for John Kasich. And I think those two guys basically were like fading while the debate was happening, and everyone else was bigger and louder.
But it's crazy at this point to be talking about Jeb Bush being one of the winnowed candidates, and it's not something that the people that support his campaign are going to find easy to accept.
No, the whole theory of Jeb was that he's like grown up and sort of moderate, and he'll have the donors.
And there's a billion billionaires behind him. Yeah,
he'll just hang around. But these donors are getting antsy. They've got Marco Rubio. What do they need Jeb for?
It was a really telling moment tonight when Jeb Bush and Marco Rubio first got into it, and they got into it over this criticism they tried to lay at Rubio's feet that he's missed a bunch of votes. And today, Jeb introduced himself to Marco as one of his constituents and suggested he resign, and it didn't go great for Bush at all.
I gotta say, look, that
Rubio came back on him hard.
Rubio won in terms of style, but Rubio pushed back. That exchange happened because CNBC said, look, Marco Rubio, in your own home state, the Florida Sun-Sentinel has written an editorial saying that you should resign if you don't like being in the Senate, because you've said you don't really like the Senate, and that's why you miss all these votes and why you're running for president. And he said, you know what? That's just a great example of the liberal media bias. The liberal media is always out to get us Republicans, and we're screwed. And Jeb Bush came back and said, you know, if the Sun Sentinel is so biased, for the liberals, then why did they endorse you? I thought it was a pretty great burn. But then Jeb just kind of goes back to being like, goes back to being like Eeyore, you know?
It was old material, and I'm glad you brought that up. The moderators were so hostile.
Yeah,
they basically burned like 20% of the debate time by inviting the candidates to grandstand against the media. Because you didn't need to ask mean questions to get these guys to be mean to each other, but that's what they decided to do. And
you don't think they asked substantive questions?
They did ask substantive questions, but there were several that were just unnecessarily attacky, I thought. For instance, confronting Rubio on his record. You know, this is the kind of thing that's going to come up. That
was definitely rooted in candidate opposition research and not a genuine thing that anyone at CNBC could possibly have been curious about.
But there were also like, you know, fluffy questions. Like they opened the debate with, you know, what is your biggest weakness?
Oh, that was the worst.
And everybody just like totally. I mean, Marco Rubio said that this is great.
That was the worst. That was like CNBC has the finger on the pulse of the cliched entry-level job interview.
Right, and they actually said that. You know, if you interview for a job, you know at any job interview, people are going to ask you what your biggest weakness is, and don't just tell me it's that you work too hard. You know, and Marco Rubio literally said, you know, it's that I'm too optimistic. And if that's true, if he actually believes that being optimistic is a weakness, it's because he actually thinks things are about to go to shit.
And what's crazy is 10 minutes later, he was like, America's running out of time. I was like, wait, you just said we have every reason to be optimistic. You asshole. It's crazy.
Jeb Bush actually earnestly answered the question.
I
like,
know.
oh, I have trouble, you know, being angry. Like,
I know, and you
man,
know what?
what are you doing here?
I have to see. Donald Trump answered the question honestly too. He basically said, in so many words, my biggest weakness is that I'm a raging dick.
I have trouble forgiving people.
It was Ted Cruz. Ted Cruz said you could have set your clock to this because he is the haughtiest douchebag in politics right now.
Oh, wow.
Ted Cruz.
Quite a claim.
Ted Cruz answered that question with if anything, I'm just too passionate. Just too passionate.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh God.
The passion of Ted Cruz, I don't really want to see it.
That's how we eliminate people from jobs everywhere else. Is when they answer that question with if anything, what's wrong with me? I'm just too passionate about success.
There was almost a lot of substance. There are tons of Social Security.
Yeah,
I was
everywhere.
Very surprised how much they talked about Social Security. I don't think it came up at all in any of the other debates. Maybe a glancing reference in the Democratic
where everybody supported expanding it.
Right.
And
no
discussion.
To CNBC's credit, they did begin this with a good question, though they were like shaking the jar and saying, hey, Mike Huckabee, why don't you say some mean stuff about Chris Christie, because I know you guys disagree about Social Security.
I love that metaphor, shaking the jar like there are a bunch of like bees.
Just to correct you, I think Clinton was in favor of enhancing it, whether that means expanding it or making it dope.
Everyone is in favor of strengthening it.
Sure.
For some reason, strengthening is the thing that Social Security needs.
So tonight, Chris Christie said, you got to tell the truth about Social Security. Who told the truth?
It was an interesting dynamic because they all told the truth. Their truth, which is that
there's truth in
everything the government says to the American people is a complete lie.
Right.
And that the $2 trillion trust fund that guarantees your benefits does not exist. Which, whatever. That's just something that Republicans always say, but they were differentiating themselves. Chris Christie was saying, I'm the real truth teller because I will tell you that it's a lie, but also that we've got to cut benefits and raise the retirement age. Ted Cruz said the same thing and endorsed the chain CPI, which reduces COLA increases. And
it reduces what you get paid as a beneficiary over time. You don't get paid as much in the future.
Mike Huckabee was like, that's terrible. Like, you can't do that to people. It's their money. It's not an entitlement. So he is going far to the left of the other guys, but nobody wanted to come out and say something like, well, we really got to, do something nasty to Social Security.
So I want to talk about the scammiest, weirdest thing that happened in the debate, because I had not been familiar with this before this debate, CNBC asked Ben Carson a question about his involvement with a Texas-based company called Manatech. It's a dietary supplement company. They got into all kinds of trouble for doing weird, scammy things, claiming that they would cure Down syndrome, cystic fibrosis, autism, cancer, according to the Wall Street Journal. And CNBC called him out, like, dude, you were like on their board, you were in all these ads. And he said, that's total propaganda. I did not have any involvement.
Except he said, that's propaganda.
I had no.
I did not. That's just propaganda.
So Amanda Turkle just posted a piece, filed a piece for us. Ben Carson was just lying. He's just completely lying. That was a total lie. He's in videos with them. You can find them on the internet. They are real things. They are easy to find. He just lied, and it's sort of like, you know.
Can it still be propaganda?
Even if it's true?
Yeah.
I don't know. What is the definition of propaganda? Is it something that helps the establishment?
Ben Carson is a different sort of candidate.
So, I mean, Marina said that she was baffled by him. I am baffled by him. Why do you think he is so popular right now?
Well, I don't think it's actually his sleepy manner of talking. I think that's going to get old. I thought it was wearing thin tonight because people are just like, what are you saying? Some of this is actually incoherent. It's hard to hear you. Turn your mic on. And the tithing stuff, you know, he just seems sort of clumsy, and the shtick is not going to last.
I mean, I'm just amazed. I mean, there are a lot of Republicans with business experience that were on stage tonight who have kind of embarrassing business experience, right? Like John Kasich and Jeb Bush working for Lehman Brothers. Carly Fiorina's record at HP is pretty terrible. I mean, 30,000 layoffs, the stock price went down by 50%, widely regarded as one of the worst Fortune 500 executives, like who didn't go to jail.
How do you measure confronting entrenched management? I mean, isn't that like, I confronted the managers?
She did. She did.
Very Mitt Romney.
She totally confronted the entrenched managers and then destroyed the company. That's exactly what she did.
What is that? But you know, don't you think though her explanation? She's been put on the spot about Hewlett Packard before, and I think that she's pulling it off. I think that among people who don't have as knowledgeable an understanding of what went on during that period of time, I think that she's pulling off her explanations. I think that she's winning that argument.
She makes two basic arguments when she says my record at HP was good. One is that that the general stock market environment was terrible for tech companies. Things were going to hell. So the NASDAQ declined 80%, she said tonight. So the fact that my stock only declined 50% means that I was a big winner. That's a tough argument to make because the NASDAQ at this time was full of all of these fake companies like Pets.com that were valued at multi-billion dollars that were just pretend companies. So of course the NASDAQ fell like over 80% because it was full of crap, bubble, nothing companies. If you hang out in Washington, D.C. and you just drive out past the Beltway, there's this neighborhood called Dulles, and it's just full of all these empty office buildings that used to be these .com places. So HP wasn't just a .com flash-in-the-pan, nothing fake company, right? Like they had been making computers for decades, and she drove down the stock price by 50%. She also says that, look, the company got so much bigger. We had so many more revenues after me. We had so many more employees. That's true because they bought Compaq, which was a huge computer maker. When you put two companies together,
this is a really
the numbers get
complicated
bigger.
Explanation.
Right.
She's clear and concise.
But right, exactly.
I did a good job.
Nobody cares.
Basically what she said.
Basically, nobody cares about those details. And when she says, I was awesome, it was a tough time, and my company survived and Gateway didn't, people are like,
why wouldn't that work when that's exactly what Donald Trump said. I'm great. I'm always great. She also said that the minimum wage, the federal minimum wage, is unconstitutional.
Oof.
Which is
that was really weird.
Not quite as bad as saying like Social Security is unconstitutional, but is nearing third rail status. When Joe Miller did this in 2010, it ruined his campaign.
I mean, it's a very interesting contrast with, say, the Democratic Party, where everybody there is a battle within the Democratic Party as to how high the minimum wage needs to go, right? Like whether $15 an hour is too high, and maybe we need to have regional adjustments, and it should be lower in certain types of industries. But nobody in the Democratic Party thinks that the minimum wage, full stop, should be repealed. That it's a violation of the American Constitution.
It's an unusual position within the Republican Party as well.
And
there should be
interesting
no
that we are
federal
talking
minimum wage.
about Carly Fiorina's weird constitutional position on this, and not Rand Paul, who has the most sort of narrow vision of what the Constitution will allow in the economy.
Well, right now we're going to talk about Howard Fineman's position, which is in South Carolina. He filed this report today after hanging with some Donald Trump supporters.
How many in your group, ma'am? Please, in this group over here, I appreciate it.
I'm going to run for president because we want to make this country great again. Wow, thank you. The word illegal immigrants, the problem that we're having in this country, it's a tremendous problem with the border and border security and lack of border security.
One of the things you got to say about the border, I think we've let our border get out of control.
Out of curiosity, do you agree with what he has to say on that?
Personally, I don't, but that's also because the main issue that I remember about his immigration policy is building a wall, and I don't really see how that would be effective or probable.
We have such stupid leadership. And if you think that with Yemen, you take a look at that border with Saudi Arabia, if you think they're stopping at Yemen, they don't want Yemen. They want the oil.
So it's not necessarily that they don't like what Barack Obama's doing. It's that they want somebody who talks tougher than Obama does.
Yeah, more genuine, I guess.
More what?
More genuine.
Genuine.
What I'm saying is that's the mindset that we need as a country. We need to take back our jobs from China and other places. We need to make great deals with other countries.
Well, not politics as usual. This is the main thing for me. No politics as usual.
I'd like to see him turn this country around financially.
I feel that it's Donald Trump's charisma and his ability to persuade people using his rhetoric in all of his speeches. He's very capable of expressing his views without using what some people call a political filter.
I like what he got to say.
I would say that he's a businessman, and I guess the people are really into that, and they think that he's going to have good ideas on how to improve the economy.
We believe he'll get people back to work. I think he's got some great ideas.
Well, he has good financial points.
You mean because he's a businessman?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I think that he is something different and he's something fresh, and he is successful at business, and I feel that it wouldn't be a bad thing to run this country as a business.
How many in your group, ma'am? Please, in this group over here, I appreciate it.
Well, if you didn't care for tonight's debate on CNBC, you weren't alone. RNC Chairman Reince Priebus had this to say after the debate concluded. Quote, "While I was proud of our candidates and the way they handled tonight's debate, the performance by the CNBC moderators was extremely disappointing and did a disservice to their network, our candidates, and voters. One of the great things about our party is that we are able to have a dynamic exchange about which solutions will secure a prosperous future, and I will fight to ensure that future debates allow for a more robust exchange. CNBC should be ashamed of how this debate was handled." Should they be ashamed?
That's outrageous. Let's just be clear. CNBC is the Fox News of Wall Street, okay? Like, if you think that people on Wall Street love Democrats so much that they just want to tear down everybody in the Republican Party, then you live in a weird world where you live in a weird world that is not the actual real world. And so, I mean, I feel like that's an easy thing for Reince Priebus to say because all the candidates on stage got their biggest applause lines when they were like dumping on the media and the liberal media is out to get us. CNBC is the media of capital. The Republican Party is the party of capital. Marco Rubio is the candidate of capital within the party of capital. Like Donald Trump is a billionaire. Like what what the hell is going on
Well,
here?
I should perhaps be ashamed because I forgot to make note of the fact that we have just changed our chair. Welcome, Julia Craven, to this fabulous moment. Sorry about that. I'm terrible. I'm the worst, right?
You're the absolute worst.
Yep, we're all agreed. We're all agreed. Did you find CNBC's debate to be like slipshod, shoddy, the worst? Any of those things?
Not really.
Did you relate to it at all?
Considering that I'm a middle-class black woman, no. But I don't think it was as bad as he's making it out to be.
Yeah.
I mean, it was a debate.
Right.
They did their job. They asked fair questions. I feel like they could have been tougher, but I mean, I don't understand where that's coming from.
I was struck by the sort of narrow scope of the issues that were discussed both in the undercard debate and the overcard. I mean, if you go back to the Democratic debate that we covered together a couple of weeks ago, I mean, there was gun control. There was a very passing but still explicit reference to Black Lives Matter. They talked about, I guess Social Security came up. Foreign policy was all over the Democratic Party debate. Bernie Sanders got really slapped around on that, I thought. Didn't really happen tonight. I mean, granted it was CNBC, but I mean, were there issues that you thought just were weirdly undercovered for a presidential debate?
Yes, I don't expect them to talk about Black Lives Matter anymore, especially in the GOP debate. I expect that if it does come up, it's just going to be brushed over. But I was a little shocked that it wasn't more national security focused. Because for the GOP, this is becoming a national security election. Yeah. So it was very shocking that they just didn't really talk about it at all.
It's interesting, the tax plans, I felt like they did a very bad job distinguishing between themselves. I mean, and we've said earlier, that's because all of their tax plans are basically insane, like multi-trillion dollar
It was weird they
deficit
picked on
things.
Donald Trump's tax plan in particular.
Yeah, but not everybody else's, which are also big budget busting crazinesses. Right. But they didn't go after foreign policy. Where I mean, I feel like the Republican rush has been like who can promise more wars?
I didn't expect them to go after.
And who's going to beat ISIS and kill the terrorists, exactly.
I, to be honest with you guys, I didn't expect them to talk about foreign policy.
Really?
I expected them to keep it to the economy because it's CNBC. Because you probably don't want Carl Quintanilla and Becky Quick talking about ISIS, talking about Syria strategy. At the same time...
But did the GOP candidates talk about Syria strategy?
No, they didn't. They hewed to the conventions of the questions.
Does anybody talk about Syria's strategy in Syria, though, on the Democratic side like either, though? I mean,
right. But what I'm saying is I think CNBC came into this thinking they would conscribe themselves to their sort of like house questions, financial markets, the economy in general. Right. But, I think you hit the nail on the head that you heard a lot of questions where, if you remember the investor class, it would have meant something to you. The critique of Carly Fiorina wasn't that her decisions led to bad product management or that people lost their jobs. Their critique of Fiorina was the stock market did this when you were there, and when stock market do this, people think CEO bad. And that's like literally the kind of conversation that only CNBC really has. To you and me, the susurrations of the stock market are largely meaningless.
Right, and I was, just to go off of that, I mean, it just didn't strike me as a debate that was understandable to people outside of the financial realm. So it was...
Seemed fine to me.
Well, there you have it. There you go.
Did anybody stick out for you as particularly good or bad?
I like Jeb Bush's kiss reference just because it was funny.
Wait, I missed this. Wait, what was it?
Count yourself among the only people who think that.
What was his kiss reference?
Funny.
Okay.
I just thought it was
Can you guys fill me in here?
He said give a warm kiss. I'll find the right quote. You guys keep talking.
Ooh, wow, yeah, wow.
Yeah,
I feel
he said he was going to give warm kisses. And I was just like, oh, that's funny. It's really gross, but funny.
I don't know. It sounds to me like maybe you got a thing for Jeb Bush there, huh, Julia?
Someone has to.
No.
So I mean, I thought he did really badly tonight. I felt like, I didn't think he did like remarkably badly, but I felt like he's been doing so badly that for him to just do blah bad like everybody else, it's kind of like time to pull the plug. But
here's the line. You find me a Democrat that would cut spending $10, I'll give them a warm kiss.
That's not funny to you?
I feel like he's going to be very profligate in his
I don't know.
kissing.
I'm kind of afraid because, like, maybe I would cut spending $10 if I were in charge of the party.
Also, is that a threat? I would be like, whoa, don't cut spending. I don't want George Bush to give me a warm kiss.
I feel like we're being kind of homophobic, though, here, Jason, you and me. We're not
sorry.
being fair. We're being gross. We're being not fair.
No, I'm specifically talking about what it's like to be kissed by Jeb Bush, a man who always appears like he's in a hostage video. Not like it's was to be kissed by another dude.
Yeah.
That's cool.
I guess I have to. I don't know. I'm coming around to this. I was giving you a hard time. That was actually a sort of like. He literally said warm. I mean, there was lifeblood in it, right? Whereas most of the debate was bloodless numbers.
Mushy and, you know.
Exactly what we think about.
It was affectionate. It was affectionate.
Any other moments that jumped out at you?
Yeah. The fact that I don't really have any moments from Donald Trump.
Yes. They really kind of gutted his game.
They did.
In like the first part of the debate, they allowed a little bit of breathing room at the second, but I don't know. It felt like a nice vacation, right, from Donald Trump.
I actually enjoyed laughing at Donald Trump's antics. And I think that's safe to say because we cover him as entertainment, so I do enjoy that aspect.
Sure.
And I didn't get that tonight, and I was a little disappointed. But I was also relieved because it is a lot. More times than not, it's a lot. Especially when he's on Fox News and like that's just his life force.
I felt like he came out of the gate and really clocked John Kasich, and then the rest of the night I was like, is he sick? Like, is he just not feeling well? Like, does he have a cold? Because I mean, all over MSNBC, we have MSNBC on in the newsroom a lot of the time, and for like the last couple of days, they've been airing this Donald Trump clip where he's like in Iowa, being like, "Hey Iowa. You know, I hear that I'm down in the polls with this Ben Carson guy. What'd I do to you? Come on. I hate losing. I hate being in second place. You guys got to come out and vote for me. If you don't come out and vote for me, I'm never coming back here again." He's cracking all these jokes. He's like spunky. He sounds you know,
he's being
irascible.
charismatic.
Right. And then tonight he was just like, you know, my tax plan's fine, and you know, I'm pretty good, and these other guys they're not very good either. So, and it was like not that but do you think it's because he sets his expectations so high, right? That he's always the guy who like delivers uppercuts every time he talks. That just when he just says he has like a debate performance, people are like, oh, no, but nobody bled to death on stage, so it was a boring boxing match.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, I do think that's it. I don't know. He just kind of sounded like he had a PR person tonight.
Yeah,
and it was really.
See, I attribute that to him being a little bit prepared. You're attributing it to being a little bit managed. Perhaps it's the same thing.
I think it's the same thing. I think it's the same thing.
Yeah, no, he sounded like some. One of the things that I think has been appealing about his candidacy for people, and I do not find his candidacy appealing, to be absolutely clear, is that he doesn't sound like a politician. He comes out and he just says shit.
Sometimes you sounded like you find it a little appealing, Zach. I'm just going to point that out.
Well, here's the
thing. I
don't
think you ever did answer the question, who won the debate?
I
you
think
made
you
all of
can-
us answer it, but I don't think you did.
I think you can always be here for Donald Trump shenanigans. You don't have to be here for his policies
Yeah,
or
exactly.
just the fact that he's running for president.
Exactly. It's like watching a cat chase his tail. It's fun, but you hope the cat never catches the tail because there'll be blood everywhere.
Well, I did think he
gross.
won the
It's so
first
clownish.
debate. I thought he did because I thought people, and maybe it's because the expectations were low, that he was going to come out and just vomit all over himself and get slapped around by the real politicians, and then he slapped around the real politicians.
There's lots of imagery here. Vomit all over himself, cat chasing the tail, and there being blood everywhere. I just wanted to point that out.
It is interesting. I mean, that's a good point. I mean, we do use violent metaphors for both sports and for politics when
They
that
are
is
violent.
Arguably gross and terrible and coarsening the public dialogue. So that said, I felt like Donald Trump could have improved upon he could have delivered a stronger performance than he delivered tonight. I don't know, Jason. I'm really hard pressed to name a winner tonight. I'm just really, really hard pressed. It seemed like a really big time snoozer of a debate. I don't want to say that Marco Rubio did because everybody else is saying it, so I want to come up with somebody else. So I want to ask Julia who she thought won while I come up with somebody who is not Marco Rubio.
All right, you think about it. Julia, who won the debate?
Let's just give it to Carly. I mean, why not?
3 pages, that's why.
Why not?
She wants the tax code to be 3 pages long. What the hell?
I just threw a name out there because honestly, I'm in the Rubio camp. So I just want to be different. And just throw it
I mean,
in
Mike
there.
Huckabee gave a pretty full-throated defense of Social Security benefits. That
Wow,
was
you're gonna say-
refreshing.
Can we talk about the Ferguson effect?
You're going to say Mike Huckabee.
Oh, yeah. Did they? Did they?
Well, it wasn't Huckabee. It was Christie. Sometimes I get them confused. Anyway.
Different fat white guys?
You said that, not me.
Yeah.
Just, we're going to quote you on that.
We all tend to look alike. It's okay. That's why I grew a beard. That's why I grew a beard, so you can tell me apart. But go on.
Yeah, I totally mistake you for Chris Christie all the time.
All the time.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
totally
Really? I thought you were Mike Huckabee.
And I'm always yelling at teachers and playing the bass. So it makes it even harder. It makes it even harder. But go ahead.
Oh, he does play guitar, doesn't he?
He does, yeah.
Oh, the
yeah,
bass
he
is
does.
terrible. Oh,
Yeah.
God. But better than Martin O'Malley playing the acoustic guitar and singing lousy folk
They're
songs.
both headed in the direction of bar band, closer than heading to the White House.
Dive bar band.
So you liked Rubio. What's the pitch for Rubio? Why
Yeah,
did he
tell
do
me
well
why you
tonight?
like Rubio. You don't
I
have to be
think he
different.
I think he just got up there and he defended himself. Like he said what he needed to say. He defended his policies. He defended his opinions, and he did it fairly well. I feel like better than we've seen him in the past debates.
I think I'm going to say Ted Cruz won. This is a contrarian opinion. I'm being deliberately contrarian, so honestly, my gut is with what Julia just said. But this is a more fun thing to say. So, look, here's the case for Ted Cruz. He said completely false, ridiculous, liary things. He got called out on it by the debate moderators. He got wild applause. The other anti-establishment candidates, Fiorina, Carson, Trump, I think all had mediocre to bad debates.
Yeah, they did.
And he didn't, he looked like frankly looked like a higher energy candidate than all three of them tonight. And so I think his strategy of sort of drafting behind the other anti-establishment candidates this may have paid off for him today. He may have a bump in the polls when those people are like, yeah, I don't know about Ben Carson and his weird scammy business thing that they talked about.
And you know how Cruz occasionally dragged himself back into the inside was when he talked about how he led so many fights. When there was anger or unrest in the body politic, he brought that anger and unrest to Congress and led a fight against it. And that is not something that Trump or Carly or Ben can say about what they've done.
But to be clear, when he brings the fight to Washington, what he means is I shut down the government pretty much all by myself.
Right.
And that is apparently a cool thing to do in the Republican Party.
Well, maybe falling out of vogue, but it's certainly a cool thing for Cruz to do. Maybe in the end, I'll be interested in seeing the ratings for this debate. Because, to be honest with you, you got Reince Priebus complaining about it. You got us sort of sitting around thinking there's no real defined winner. We both wish other questions had been asked. We feel like there was like too tight a noose over the topics. We didn't get a foreign policy, no education, right? No environment. Nothing like that. And there actually were a number of different topic areas where we could have heard some good and innovative ideas, perhaps, but they never came up. It's possible that if the ratings are low enough, we might all just call this one a mulligan. And if you did great, maybe you didn't do so great. And if you lost, maybe you didn't lose.
I mean, I think that's true. That's a phenomenon that happens with these types of with the debates generally. Is the first one's a big deal, and then people steadily lose interest until it's very clear there's a couple of people who have to like go up against each other.
Right.
But I mean, I agree with you, Julia, in that I don't expect Republicans to be asked about Black Lives Matter. I don't expect them to talk about it, but I would really like to see that answer because I feel like the Democrats got to talk about it for like 2 minutes and be like, oh yeah, Black Lives Matter, okay, peace out, let's go move on to some other thing. They get like a free pass on the issue because everybody knows the Republicans are so bonkers. I mean, what would you have wanted to hear? Or what can you imagine having heard from the Republicans if someone had asked them, do Black Lives Matter tonight?
I'm just going to base that answer off of what Christie said about the Ferguson effect. He's just like, like cops are scared to get out of their cars and they're scared to do their job. And, that's resulting in this spike on crime. And it's just like, actually, that's not what spikes crime.
Right.
So
there's unarmed 11-year-olds running around everywhere, guys.
Exactly.
Stay in your cars.
It's like, oh my God, all of these teenagers are just running around.
Well, you know what's
ridiculous.
Funny? Here's an observation I'll make about this. It seems to me anytime you get a news story like we got this week, that kid being body slammed by a school resource officer.
Yeah.
There seems to be a part of the conservative movement that is super duper eager to be the first to say that kid totally deserved to get body slammed.
Asked for it.
You know, they stand up. No one is before anyone's even like diving into the issue, and they're like, we just want to point out that kid deserved what he got for misbehaving. But these candidates, none of them have that. I mean, I hesitate to call this courage or guts, but these candidates, maybe some of them are itching to express the same sentiments, but something's keeping them constrained.
I mean, there's this division. There has been a longstanding division in the conservative movement about whether the federal government and the state and state governments exercise too much force against the populace. That like the small government conservatives say, look, we should rein in this whole like police brutality thing. We shouldn't have people like burning down people's houses and like marijuana raids. We shouldn't be shooting people over nothing.
Right.
And so this is the libertarian wing of the party. I'm thinking of people like Radley Balco, who are very serious, thoughtful people about this type of policy, who are critical of police forces for being overly militarized. And there are some publications like the National Review which occasionally publish things saying that these are problems, that they need to do something about it. But NRO, National Review Online, had an article by I think it was David French the other day, which was basically saying, the kid kind of asked for it. And you had Glenn Beck on Megyn Kelly saying, this is the first step to anarchy. These children mouthing off the cops, and
that's crazy.
You wonder, like, if it came up. So if the question did come up at the debate, if that's the Republican base, like if that's the Fox News audience that people are talking to, if that's even the it's not like there are millions of like poor white subscribers to the National Review. It's a relatively elite publication. It's a Beltway publication. It's for political insiders.
Right.
If that's where the insiders and the base are at, like what would Republicans say if they were actually asked about what to do about police brutality? It's a tough question, I think.
I don't think so. I think most of them would pander to their voters. I mean, they're politicians. They're just going to be like, okay, well, the voters, they want cops.
Yeah,
so
and I mean, I think politically too, right? Like, we don't expect black voters to come out for, we expect a 90-10 split, right, on the black vote. The question is always how many of them come out to vote for Democrats. It's going to be 90-10 for Democrats in any presidential election, but how many show up?
And I think that's why the pressure is harder on the Democratic Party, because it's just like, hey, y'all get the black vote consistently. Mm-hmm. So you should be held more accountable. You should be asked these really tough questions, which is why Black Lives Matter is pushing for a Democratic debate specifically on these issues. The Republican National Committee has said that they will promote a town hall as well. But I just don't really know if that would, I just don't know how that would go down.
I mean, I agree. I mean, I don't know how it would go down, but we know that from the last two elections, right, the presidential elections, the Obama elections, the margin of victory, it's basically really high black turnout. That's basically it. If the Democrats
not just high black turnout, but high Hispanic turnout as well.
True.
Right.
But if Democrats can't get high non-white turnout, they're screwed. That's the coalition. They've got to convince people. Not only am I more on your side than the Republicans, but I'm going to fight for you. And there is a reason for you to be excited enough about me to vote for me, and not to think that I'm just going to be like kind of half-assing it. And I feel like in the Democratic debate so far, and in honestly most of the main like top tier political debate that we talk about, like in the press about the Democratic side, there are a lot of Black Lives Matter stories, but the candidates you just do not see the candidates talking about Black Lives Matter on a regular basis. When they do, they're like, let me be clear, Black Lives Matter. Let me be clear, but this is important.
Right.
They all say that.
And anyone can say that. Anyone decent will say that. Hopefully, God, I hope you think that the lives of black people matter, because we are people.
No Labels is the kind of organization that would institutionally be like, all lives matter, no labels. They would totally be like that.
I mean, we talked about this last time, though, right?
Like, yeah, I mean, we always have this conversation. So it's like any decent person would just be like, hey, like the lives of black Americans are important. But it just, you have to go further than that, because the bottom line is that the system does not treat black lives like they matter. So we have a bigger problem. especially in policing and mass incarceration and economics, because most of the poor people in this country are Black and they don't have access to grocery stores or anything like that.
Banking system, I mean.
Banks, yes.
Where's
so,
Phil? Oh, Phil's behind the camera. Phil
Hey,
Phil Lewis is behind the camera. He did a cool piece. I think was it today, Phil? It happened. It went up. I saw it today. I may have been late to it. It was just like 6 questions that like different Black Lives Matter activists from different parts of the country would like to see asked at a debate, and they were all totally different. They're all totally different. One was on like economic security. One was on what would you do to rehabilitate like ex-cons, make them part of society while like paying a price for actual crimes. It was a pretty broad spectrum of issues, and I feel like when we talk about Black Lives Matter to the extent that we do, we just basically talk about criminal justice reform like this broad thing. Like
exactly, and we focus on policing, we focus on mass incarceration when it's a big issue. Like systemic racism is not just cops like to beat up and shoot Black people, and let's lock up all of the Black folks and have them in jail forever. And then whenever they get out, let's like find a very, very simple 3 strikes. Hey Hillary, kind of way to get them back in jail.
Can you detail what you mean by 3 strikes? Hey Hillary, there for our viewers who are not familiar with that.
Well, basically in 1994, President Bill Clinton signed the crime bill, and it was heavily endorsed by Hillary Clinton. It's a tough on crime initiative, building more private prisons, facilitated mass incarceration. That's just the SparkNotes version. So
I mean, you can see the incarceration level. Like there's like a little charts. Like
it's
here,
just
it's here, and the crime bill passes, and it goes like that.
And Joe Biden, who was almost poised to jump into this race, still brags about the crime bill, and it led me to wonder, how exactly was Joe Biden ever an alternative to Hillary Clinton?
It's a baffling thing. It's totally baffling.
It was absolutely very, very strange. It never made much sense to me at all.
And yet tonight, I mean, as you pointed out, Julie, I mean, the only like sort of glancing blow toward Black Lives Matter, while we're sticking with violent metaphors, was Chris Christie being like, "Hey, yo, police unions, endorse me, please. Please endorse me, police unions. I will never say anything bad about cops ever."
Pro-cop.
Which, like, to be clear, I mean, Barack Obama just gave a speech where he was like, you can be pro-cop. You can say that cops are awesome and they are great.
Right.
And still be against cops just, like, shooting Black people for no reason. Like, those are totally consistent, right?
NPR did a story on West Baltimore, and the residents of West Baltimore, which, for those of you who don't know, this is Freddie Gray's part of Baltimore. It got hit the hardest by the uprising. The residents of West Baltimore, specifically his neighborhood, they want cops. They're just like, hey, because like we have a lot of drug abuse here, like there's a lot of dealers here, so it's like we want police officers in our community to protect us, but that's what we want them to do, to protect us. We don't want them coming in here harassing us and shaking us down for no reason. Like, we want them to do their jobs. So to say that people who call for police reform are anti-cop, I think that's a huge stretch. Like, that's a reach.
Right.
And it's just not true.
All right, well, we have to step away for a minute, but we will be right back.
Nice, as usual.
Thank
back. And joining us now
we're back.
Is one of our bosses. Yes, we are right now back on the
air. Jeez, I had no idea.
What are the? We put these cameras in front of you. What happens?
That's what they're there for. Yeah. Oh my God.
Yeah, man. Sam Stein, everybody.
Hi guys. What's up?
He is.
How's it going here tonight?
It's going great, man.
It looks great. I saw it on
the
control room. It looked very nice.
Yeah, so we've been asking everyone who won the debate because we're cliche mavens.
I know, that's so cliche.
All right, who came
Someone's
in
got to
fourth?
win, though.
Who came in fourth? Carly.
Carly came in fourth. Fair enough. Good, congratulations.
Well, who do you think won the
debate?
What is the consensus among people who sat in this
We're really having
chair?
a hard time with it, to be honest with you.
Okay, well, the conventional wisdom is Rubio, right?
Yeah, I would say so.
I said Ted Cruz just to be contrarian.
Even though Rubio is going to move up in the polls.
Contrarian would have been Jeb, basically. Yeah.
That would have been the hardest
Jeb just
case
didn't
to make.
win, so that's like not true. Contrarian, no, but the case for Ted Cruz is that the other anti-establishment candidates had a really rough night, and he had a lot of really big applause lines by just saying.
So our two main pieces tonight. There's two pieces. One is the sort of dynamic of Marco and Jeb, this whole protege-teacher type thing. But I think, the truth is, I think Marco Rubio's skill set is just much more compatible with modern presidential politics than Jeb's at this juncture.
Yeah.
Certainly for the party that they're part of. And then the other big piece that we're doing is the one that Igor's filing out in Boulder, which is more so than at any moment, I think, in this campaign, you saw traditional establishment Republicans, people who actually hold elected office, kind of dominated conversation versus the Trump, Carson, Carly Fiorina types. And if you saw the actual timing, the amount of time that these candidates got, the one that ABC had those three all in the bottom, which is remarkable because Trump and Carson are 1 and 2 in the polls, yet they ended up getting the least amount of time. So
Bush
was down there too. Yeah. So that's basically where I'm coming from is that maybe we're at that point where people start to say, okay, the outsiders are not exactly the flavor du jour.
You know people in the Bush campaign.
I do.
What do they tell a guy like this right now?
Tell me or tell Bush?
I'm sure they're telling you all kinds of
lies,
rank nonsense, terrible nonsense. But I mean, today, right before it's just like everything about their campaign is so sad. Today, right before the debate, the Bush campaign put up this trolly Twitter account trying to make fun of Marco Rubio for missing work. And over the course of the first 2 hours, they put 2 tweets on it. And I was like, are you parodying his work ethic by doing a shitty job with your troll Twitter account?
That's hilarious.
Where is all the money that Bush and Mike Murphy keep talking about going? I'm not seeing it on the screen.
That's a good point.
Not seeing it on the screen.
So the Super PAC did that Twitter account, and the question rate
We don't differentiate.
No. I'm saying the question rate is great because they're sitting on all this money, and that's what they come up with. It's kind of hysterical.
A couple of tweets.
But also as a tactical move, think about it. They basically advertised to Rubio the exact line of attack that was coming tonight. There was no grand design or thought here. They told Rubio, this is what we're going to hit you on, which made it so easy for him to just come back and say what he said tonight.
What are they telling him? What are they telling Bush?
Well, it's, there's two mindsets here, right? I think within the campaign, they're obviously a little bit panicked because they've cut down on the number of staffers.
Right.
They're cutting salaries. That's directly correlated to the fact that fundraising's tough now, not what it once was.
Which is correlated to his low poll.
Exactly. So it's all self-reinforcing. But then I think there is a mindset in that camp, and I think in the Republican Party at large, that I don't dismiss, which is that the best way to win a primary election like this is sheer resilience. And the more you overreact, the more you panic, the more crazy things you do, the less helpful it is. That literally what you have to do is just be there standing.
Tough. Everyone
I wanna make a point
is equally
here,
able to be resilient.
But remember that the whole theory of the Jeb Bush candidacy was just overwhelming financial force.
Clearly,
he basically forced Mitt Romney out of the race before he even got in by saying, "I'm hiring all these people and I'm stealing all your donors, so you get out."
Yeah.
And this is where he's at now. duking it out with Marco Rubio for like maybe getting 7 or 8% of the vote, while they're both still, I mean, as of tonight, trailing Donald Trump and Ben Carson, who I did not think had very good debate nights. But I mean, did you think there was anybody on the stage tonight who would have done better than Bernie Sanders against Hillary Clinton in last week's Democratic debate?
Who would have done better than Bernie against Hillary? What do you mean? Like, oh, as in faced Hillary better?
Yeah.
You know, my theory about the Democratic debate is a bit different probably than yours. I thought Hillary did very well, but I think it's fair to say that, you know, the talent level in the Democratic Party is not that great. I mean, she was on there with a couple of people who are no longer running. And Bernie Sanders' main point, I think the one he won the most applause for, was not an attack on Hillary, but actually coming to her defense.
Yeah.
So we're talking about a totally different dynamic than what would happen in a general election debate, in which no one on that stage would say, we don't care about your emails. They'd whack her relentlessly for it. So it's tough to say who would do better than Bernie. I think, as a general matter, Bernie's a very savvy communicator and debater and speaker, and he's proven that. I think there are some candidates in the Republican field who have similar abilities, but it's really tough to say one would do better than Bernie or not because they're in totally different mindsets.
I was struck that the people who've been good at throwing knives in the debate so far have been Donald Trump early.
Yeah.
He was good in his first questions tonight. The rest of the time I was like, are you drinking cough syrup? Like, where'd you go?
He's going to want the next.
But
after that, it was like Rubio and Jeb going after each other, and I guess Rubio got the upper hand of that. But Jeb's been like kind of the Eeyore candidate for a while now, so it's beating up on Jeb.
Fiorina had the most time tonight. She had the most time tonight.
But I think in some respects, you know, what I said about the Democratic debate having like sort of substandard candidates, like that's Rubio's competition with Jeb, right? No one's actually gone after Rubio in a very sustained, substantive, character assaulting type of way, which is his weakness. I mean, there are a whole host of financial issues back in Florida that someone could call him out on, but it just hasn't been done. And so I'm curious to see when this field gets sort of narrowed down a little bit and you actually have candidates who spend, you know, instead of getting 10 minutes, get 20 minutes, you know, whether they'll have a sustained attack on Rubio and how he'll deal with it. Because to this point, he's been very deft at parlaying it and throwing it aside. But just like Hillary, he hasn't really faced it in a full frontal way.
Yeah. I have to say I was completely wrong about how I thought the debate would go tonight. I thought that Trump would be looking askance at Rubio and trying to face him up and body him out of the race.
But see, I agree. Like,
I think he just let the psychic weight of being entangled Jeb Bush do the work, and he just did what he wanted.
Also, don't you think like this is like Trump hates this shit?
Definitely.
He's like, I don't want to be on the stage with these mother effers, and like I get 2 minutes to talk, and that's it. I mean, it's like it's just not his cup of tea. I mean, he likes the stage, but
can't be just riffing in Iowa for
he's
simultaneously working to limit the amount of time he has to talk, and then bitching when it isn't good.
Exactly.
It's really insane.
But, you know, I thought he was going to go after Ben Carson because he's suddenly trailing Ben Carson in a lot of important calls.
Complimented Ben instead.
So, yeah, he didn't really. I mean, John Casey was the only guy who really went hard at Carson all night, and I mean, I thought he landed some pretty serious blows. I mean, it is kind of nuts for Ben Carson to say like, I want to end Medicare. That's a crazy thing to
there's
say.
nothing coherent about what even Ben Carson has trouble articulating what exactly he's advocating. Like there is really not like an economic philosophy behind what he's saying. So it's really tough
his tax plan, right? Where he's like,
I don't even know what it is. He doesn't know what it is. He's like, maybe it's 10%. I don't know. I called for some flat tax or something. And it's like, well, what am I?
Closer to 15, he said at one point.
So when you're faced with that, like, how do you actually go about attacking it? Because he's just like, no. I didn't say 10, but I didn't tell you what it was. I was like, okay, I don't know. Maybe.
I don't know. Yeah. How dare you attack me? I haven't told you anything yet.
I mean, that's it, though. It's like basically that summarizes.
But do you have a theory behind like an explanation for his popularity with the Republican Party? Because I mean, I have hypotheses for like Donald Trump and Carly Fiorina, but I don't get Carson at all. I just don't get it.
I totally get it. I think one thing you have to understand about Ben Carson is that he's been I don't want to say preaching in the religious sense, but in the sort of cultural sense for decades. I mean, he has been a cultural figure, giving self-motivation talks, self-help talks, writing books, speaking to crowds, doing these types of forms that are sort of traditional campaign forms everywhere. And so he's quite adept at this type of atmosphere. And on top of that,
If he's so adept at this, then why does he just sort of like mumble into his shoes all the time?
It works. And then on the second,
so not threatening.
But on the second point, if you remove like the objectively insane stuff that he has said, and you focus squarely on biography, it's a legitimately amazing story. I mean, it is a completely remarkable, beautiful story that draws people to it. And the people I talked to at CPAC, for instance, when I did a story about who these people were who were coming up from Georgia and Alabama and Mississippi all the way to Washington, D.C. just to see Ben Carson speak, they look at him not as a politician but as a quasi-religious figure. And that's the draw.
I mean, it's true when you hear Republicans talk about the economy or when they talk about the proper role of government, that, you know, they don't really talk about the deficit anymore the way they used to. They don't talk about percentages and dollar figures. They basically have this core belief that they hit over and over again that if you want to make it in America and you want to work hard, then you can.
It's grit.
You can do it. That is there. There is no opportunity that is shut off from you if you try hard enough.
And rightfully so. That's what every single candidate is telling them, right? I mean, Donald Trump's big solution to the deficit, to immigration, to whatever is be great.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's awesome.
Just be great. And if everyone who is at the top of your party is saying what we need is resolve, what we need are leaders in Washington willing to stand up for, forget all the institutional hurdles, forget how government actually works, forget the trade-offs you have to make, forget the fact that 50% of the country roughly is Democrat. If we just try hard enough, things will come our way.
Yeah.
I mean, that sounds pretty. I would like to sign up for that.
That would be great.
But I'm a bit more of a realist, I have to say.
It would be great to make America great that way again. Sam, thanks so much
Guys,
for joining us.
it's such a pleasure.
It's almost like I'm going to have to sit next to you again tomorrow, and I'm going to enjoy
the horror.
Yeah.
The horror.
All right. Well, look, we want to thank you guys for joining us. We're gonna throw to Samantha Joe in Iowa, who I believe is at an official Ben Carson watch party. Who will tell us more about what is going on in Ben Carson land. But that is going to be it for us from the studio tonight. Thank you guys for tuning in. Samantha Joe, what you got?
Well, as you can see here, this debate watch party has wrapped up at Drake University. Organizers say around 50 students attended. This was a bipartisan group of students, both Republicans and Democrats. And what's really unique is a lot of these students have had the opportunity to meet these candidates and attend campaign rallies on the trail here in Iowa. So we asked them who the major winners and losers of tonight were.
I definitely thought that Marco Rubio did a fantastic job tonight. I think he set himself up as a true candidate and a viable candidate. He really does well in debate settings, and I think that he came across as calm, cool, collected, which is what the Americans are looking for. So I really thought he did a great job. He stood out to me. Yeah, I was expecting a lot more from Jeb Bush. I really thought that this was supposed to be the moment that he needed to prove himself, and he didn't. And I really don't think that he has much longer to go on this, at least in the leads.
I would say the main winners for tonight's debate were Cruz and Rubio. I think that they were both standout. I think Rubio is starting to establish himself as the establishment candidate over a falling Bush, which I find interesting. I think Cruz is going to start climbing in the polls again. I would say Bush really kind of didn't do anything to help himself tonight. I wasn't really sure what Huckabee's analogies were all about. That was kind of lost me a little bit.
Major winners, I thought Marco Rubio did really well. I think he came out as the strongest establishment candidate, definitely. I thought John Kasich did also very well, especially following his statements, kind of bashing the more extremist end of the Republican Party. I think he did a good job of maybe establishing why he said those things, and he was one of the only ones that actually started to lay out a solid economic plan, which I think was the point of this debate. As far as losers, I didn't hear much from Trump, which I never thought I would say. But I didn't hear much from Trump, at least nothing substantive. I think this was Jeb Bush's opportunity to really come ahead as an establishment Republican, because really the base of that is economic policy. So he could have had a lot more to say, and he really kind of, in my opinion, wasted his time.
As for the people up on stage, I would say Christie did a great job, and I would say Marco Rubio did a great job. So I would say those two kind of outshone and really stepped up their campaigns and differentiated themselves better than what they have done in the past. Absolutely, number one loser would be Jeb Bush. I think in the future this will go down as the moment that his campaign really ended. And then I would also say Ben Carson, because I think with his rise in the polls, he needed to really make a strong argument for why he stands out, why he's a viable candidate, and he was actually pretty silent most of the time.
Well, there you have it. In less than 2 weeks, it'll be the Democrats' turn to take the stage. That all happening right here at Drake University. In Des Moines, Samantha Jo Roth reporting.